Red Faith 48, Episode 19, November 17th, 2025. Episode 19 includes Chapter 20 from the memoir, Family Relations. Hello, social media mites and mavens. James Homan here. In this episode, I'll share my experiences with Harold's immediate family, particularly his elder sister, Allyn, Allyn. There were, in addition to one sister, Harold's mom, his godmother, who is also his Aunt Billy, and Billy's four married daughters, plus cousins from Connecticut, Washington, D.C., Colorado, and Los Angeles, as well as the more immediate vicinity of New York City. Great Aunt Gertrude and Great Uncle Jules topped this dynasty with a considerable fortune from years of working in the import-export business. All holidays were celebrated at the three-story brownstone in Hoboken, across from Stevens College. As one of several Goy boys included by marriage in this formidable family, I was warmly and generously included in all festivals, and I still maintain sincere relationships with Aunt Billy and her eldest daughter, Anne. Gert and Jules have passed, but Aunt Billy turned 100 years of age in 2025 and remains totally a compos mentis. Allyn and I are the same age, but of vastly different backgrounds, temperaments, education, and expectations. She has attained a law degree from Brandeis University, 2 master's degrees in both special education and arts administration from Rutgers University. She now lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in her own condominium, and according to her cousins, has only one concern: what to do with all the money she's acquired. She had been a difficult sister to Harold, who, when we met, hadn't spoken with his sister in about 10 years, although they lived less than 10 blocks from each other on Manhattan's Upper West Side. She was embarrassingly, if not shockingly, confrontational with the friends Harold brought home from school, being somewhat obsessed with women's liberation, with which we were all experiencing, with which, yeah, we were all experiencing women's lib on some level. Allyn had an edge that alienated her from most people. I had never had a sister and found this challenging. Once I got them speaking to each other again, Harold kindly suggested he had a therapist on Central Park West with whom he thought Allyn might enjoy working. It took, and Allyn was genuinely appreciative of this new aspect to her life. Her edges have softened somewhat. However, her life became an unfortunate series of personal losses, which I hope her money has made somewhat bearable. What I hope the reader is able to comprehend is another universal truth: that dysfunctional family, the term, is an oxymoron. Family relations. During Harold's illness, it became clear to me that while I would be losing my greatest love, his mother and sister were losing the one man in their lives with whom they'd maintained their most significant relationship. Control was a big issue, and one that these two women had always maintained admirably in their lives. Did this excuse or explain the few difficult dynamics that were displayed between June, Allyn, and me during Harold's final 14 months? Was any of the turbulence I may have felt compounded by these facts, or was it simply my 14 months of sleep deprivation? Did the fact that I had shared with Harold a more intimate and consistent love for almost 15 years than either his sister or mother had experienced in their lives with any man only increase their resentment and anger while he was dying? Although everyone wanted what was best for Harold, It was a heightened emotional situation, and tempers weren't always contained. Like her mother, Alan Shepard had a master's degree in special education from Rutgers University. She also had a law degree from Brandeis University. As Harold's older sister and only sibling, she had grown up in a matriarchal family that doted on its first male child in over 80 years. Alan had worked as an attorney at the Security and Exchange Commission in Washington, D.C., following law school. Alan was well traveled and well educated, knew most of the lyrics to any and all Gilbert and Sullivan operettas, and coveted her brother's ability to make and keep friends. As intelligent as her brother, she resembled her father's family to a greater extent, and I think acquired her father's competitive sense of having to fit in. I compassionately identified with that need. Unfortunately, Alan's attempts to do so frequently kept her from achieving that goal. Harold had spoken with me of the many embarrassing times his sister had intimidated the friends he'd brought home from college in the early 1970s with her extremely forward displays of sexual aggression. Female sexual liberation was très au courant for the time, and Alan proudly held the banner for this family regardless of the considerable discomfort it caused her brother or anyone else. While I'm certain that June Shepard loved her daughter, I doubt that love was shown as demonstrably toward Alan as would have been appreciated. Doting on her son, June Shepard had her own issues. A sense of competition, tacit or not, seemed to be the norm that Alan felt more distinctly than her younger brother. Harold was known to be popular and to fit in anywhere he wanted. With that popularity and being surrounded by several swooning female cousins, I doubt Alan felt much significance or importance within this family unit, unfortunately. When I met Harold, he told me that while his sister lived 10 blocks north of him on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, he wasn't particularly interested in having her in his life. Having never had a sister, I was ecstatic that he had one, whether estranged or not, and I worked to bring them together once more. As traditionally as she may have been raised, Alan possessed an honorable admiration for the avant-garde or loutre aspects of society. I began referring to her as Loutre Allen, which Harold adored. In true fashion, Allen concentrated on establishing a modern art collection that became a topic of conversation when the three of us would have dinner or when the entire Shepherd family gathered for the family gatherings in Hoboken. Halloween became our holiday, literally. Alan would join us to don costumes that totally disguised her attorney facade, and the three of us would cab down to Greenwich Village or to East 14th Street and Fifth Avenue to join friends in the parade. With me and Glam witch drag and Harold as Dracula, Alan made a damn fine Valkyrie. We literally stopped traffic and had the greatest fun doing so. Eventually, brother and sister returned to speaking terms. Their mother later admitted to me that she would love me forever for bringing her children back together. Indeed, Alan was of great assistance to me in managing her brother's care. Alan became the conduit I needed to contact the rest of their family. In April, following his first operation, Harold's prognosis was sketchy at best. Alan and I met with Dr. Isabel Germano, who had cautioned us that he would not survive. Alan, however, kept insisting, well, my brother's going to win this fight. Death is not an option for him. There's always a first-time exception. She was adamant he would survive this, almost becoming hysterical. I had to repeat to her twice that the doctor's prognosis was that Harold's illness was fatal. No one survives. An hour after Dr. Germano had left the consultation room, Alan's final acceptance of this fact resulted in a stunning silence, and weeks later she returned to talk about Harold's ability to fight the odds. Understandably, she had difficulty in accepting the diagnosis. Shortly after Harold began his first rehabilitation at Mount Sinai, we celebrated Passover in his hospital room. After everyone had departed, June and Alan said goodbye to Harold, and I walked them out. The three of us entered an empty passenger elevator. Well, I've arranged it all, James, so please don't worry, Alan said, breaking the silence within the elevator. What have you arranged, Alan? I can't imagine, was my weak response. Aunt Gert and Uncle Jules' money. I'm power of attorney for Aunt Gert, so when they die, Harold's share will be divided between you and Mom, she explained. Knowing she was only trying to be comforting and never having imagined that this was in any way an aspect of her response to Harold's illness, I could only reply, Alan, dear, I've so many more things to think of before any of that becomes necessary, but thank you. Well meaning, but awkward. Le très Alan, indeed. Interestingly, while Uncle Jules substituted my name for Harold's in his will, Aunt Gert's will remained unchanged, with Harold's percentage completely going to June, and then 1.5 years later, when June died, to Alan. I never had a sister growing up. Was this what sisters did? It seemed that Alan was genuinely concerned, and this was her way of showing concern, but it felt awkward, out of place, and unnecessary. Was this a sibling dynamic of which I was simply unaware? In front of her mother, what must June have thought? I think both mother and daughter fought a resentment of me to some extent. They weren't living with him on a daily basis. I felt confident Harold had placed his faith and trust in me. Harold and I spent hours discussing the many specific details of every step he decided to take on our journey toward his inevitable end, and he insisted on including his mother and sister in our most crucial discussions. At every opportunity, however, he would clarify for them his wishes, adding that he would appreciate their support of me in carrying them out. Harold often reminded his mother and sister that after he died, he wished for me to share my life with another. To this, June responded, somewhat defiantly, well, all right, but I plan to exercise my right of first refusal. And that concludes this podcast. Please check in next week for episode 20, Game Plan Intricacies Beyond Powers of Attorney. As always, thank you for your time and interest. Until next week, then, be kind, do good, be happy, and love one another, remembering to coexist with tolerance while embracing similarities and respecting differences.